Good evening and welcome. Tonight, we're going to take a different kind of ride. Not down the interstate with tractor trailers and mile markers, but around the most legendary racetracks in the world. We're talking about MotoGP, the pinnacle of motorcycle racing, where the bravest souls on two wheels push machines to speeds that most of us can't even imagine. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's let the sound of racing engines and the stories of legends carry you off to sleep. There's something about motorcycles that speaks to the soul. Maybe it's the freedom, the speed, the raw connection between rider and machine. Or maybe it's the courage it takes to lean into a corner at over 200 miles per hour, your knee scraping the asphalt, the bike dancing on the edge of control. MotoGP isn't just a sport. It's a test of human will, a ballet of physics and bravery, a theater where heroes are made and legends are born. For over 70 years, riders from every corner of the globe have come together to answer one simple question: who's the fastest? But the answer has never been simple. It's written in the roar of two-stroke engines and the whisper of four-stroke precision. It's carved into the asphalt of circuits from Italy to Australia, from the Netherlands to Japan. It's painted in the courage of men who have raced through rain and shine, through triumph and tragedy, leaving behind stories that echo through time. Tonight, we're not in a hurry. We've got nowhere to be but here in this moment, as we journey through the history of Grand Prix motorcycle racing. We'll meet the legends who defined entire eras, ride the circuits that have become cathedrals of speed, and relive the battles that had fans on their feet, hearts pounding, hardly daring to breathe. This is a world where milliseconds separate victory from defeat, where the difference between glory and disaster is measured in inches, where the margin for error is so thin it barely exists at all. So close your eyes when you're ready. Let the words wash over you like the wind on an open highway. And let's begin at the beginning, back when it all started, in the summer of 1949. After the Second World War ended, the world was hungry to live again. People wanted to feel something, to see something exciting, to believe in heroes and speed and the future. Across Europe, motorcycle racing had been a beloved pastime before the war, but it was scattered, unorganized, local events without much continuity. In 1949, everything changed. The Fédération Internationale de Motocyclisme, the FIM, gathered in November of 1948 at a congress in London and made a decision that would echo through the decades. They decided to create a world championship for motorcycle racing. Not just a European series, not just isolated events, but a true world championship that would crown the fastest riders on Earth. The rules were written in January of 1949. 6 races were scheduled for that inaugural season, and they would crown world champions in multiple classes: 125cc, 250cc, 350cc, 500cc, and even sidecars. These weren't street bikes. These were purpose-built racing machines, wild things that existed only to go fast, only to dance on the knife's edge between grip and disaster. The very first race of that new world championship was held on the Isle of Man, that rocky island in the Irish Sea where the roads wind through villages and over mountains, where the tourist trophy races had been held since 1907. On June 13, 1949, Harold Daniel, a British rider on a Norton, won the first ever 500cc Grand Prix race. The crowd stood in the rain and the wind, watching these brave men thunder past on machines that howled and smoked and shook. It was the beginning of something magnificent. That first championship in 1949 was a modest affair by modern standards. Only 6 races for the premier 500cc class. Riders had to be tough, resourceful, and willing to travel across Europe on trains and ferries, hauling their machines and spare parts in whatever way they could. There were no big corporate sponsors, no team trucks with telemetry and engineers. It was just riders, mechanics, and the burning desire to go faster than anyone else. The first champion was Leslie Graham of Britain, riding an AJS. He won 2 races that year, at the Swiss Grand Prix and the Ulster Grand Prix, and accumulated 30 points, just one more than his rival Nello Pagani from Italy. It was a close fight, and it set the tone for what would come. Championships decided by the narrowest of margins, where every race mattered, where one crash or one mechanical failure could cost you everything. In those early years, British and Italian manufacturers ruled the sport. Norton, AJS, Gilera, and MV Agusta were the names that dominated the entry lists. These were companies that had survived the war, that had engineering prowess and the will to compete. The bikes were single-cylinder or multi-cylinder 2-strokes and 4-strokes, air-cooled engines that screamed and vibrated and required constant attention. Riders were mechanics too, often working on their own bikes between sessions, diagnosing problems by sound and feel as much as by instrumentation. The circuits themselves were dangerous beyond modern comprehension. Many were public roads, closed for race day, with stone walls and trees lining the edges. There were no gravel traps, no air fences, no helicopters standing by to whisk injured riders to hospitals. Safety gear was minimal. A leather jacket, a pudding basin helmet, and maybe some goggles. If you crashed hard, and the consequences were often severe. Yet the riders came anyway, drawn by the thrill, the competition, the simple joy of going fast. Throughout the 1950s and into the 1960s, the championship grew. More races were added to the calendar. The Argentine Grand Prix in 1961 became the first race held outside of Europe. The Japanese Grand Prix in 1963 brought the series to Asia. The sport was becoming truly global, and with that expansion came new manufacturers, new riders, new ideas. But in those early decades, one nation stood above all others: Italy. And one manufacturer in particular would define the era. If there's a single name that echoes louder than any other in the early history of motorcycle racing, it's Giacomo Agostini. They called him a go, and he was the undisputed king of Grand Prix racing in the 1960s and 1970s. Born in 1942 in Brescia, Italy, Agostini was a rider of extraordinary talent and consistency. He won his first Grand Prix race in 1965 and didn't stop winning for over a decade. Riding for MV Agusta, the Italian manufacturer that had dominated the sport since the early 1950s, Agostini accumulated victories at a pace no one had ever seen. He won 122 Grand Prix races and claimed 15 world championships, 8 in the Premier 500cc class and 7 in the 350cc class. To put that in perspective, no rider since has matched his total world championship tally across all classes. His record stands like a mountain, a monument to an era when one man and one manufacturer ruled the sport with an iron grip. MV Agusta, based in northern Italy near Lake Como, built beautiful, powerful machines. Their 4-cylinder 500cc bikes were engineering marvels, producing over 70 horsepower at a time when that was extraordinary. The engines were hand-built, tuned to perfection, and the bikes themselves were works of art, with gleaming red and silver paint schemes that caught the light like jewels. But Agostini's dominance wasn't just about the machinery. He was a strategic rider, smooth and calculating, rarely making mistakes. While others crashed trying to find the limit, Ago found the limit and then rode right on it, lap after lap, race after race. He understood that to win championships, you didn't need to win every race. You just needed to finish ahead of everyone else more often than not. It was a philosophy that served him well. During the 1960s, MV Agusta's grip on the sport seemed unbreakable. They won race after race, often with Agostini lapping the entire field. The smaller manufacturers and privateer teams simply couldn't compete with the resources and engineering that MV Agusta brought to bear. For a time, it seemed like the sport might become boring, predictable, with the same red and silver bikes crossing the finish line first every single time. But change was coming, and it was coming from the East. In the late 1960s, Japanese manufacturers began to take Grand Prix racing seriously. Honda had already made inroads in the smaller classes, winning championships in 125cc and 250cc with their highly sophisticated multi-cylinder engines. Yamaha, Suzuki, and Kawasaki were investing in racing programs, seeing it as a way to prove their engineering capabilities and market their products. These companies had deep pockets, innovative engineers, and a determination to win. By the early 1970s, the tide was turning. Yamaha, with its two-stroke machines, began to challenge MV Agusta's supremacy. In 1972, a Finnish rider named Jarno Saarinen, riding a Yamaha, won Grand Prix races in France and Germany in the 350cc class. It was the first time in 5 years that anyone other than Agostini and MV Agusta had won in that class. The impossible was becoming possible. Tragically, Saarinen was killed in a racing accident at the 1973 Italian Grand Prix at Monza. It was a devastating loss for the sport, but Yamaha continued to push forward. And in 1974, they pulled off a coup that changed everything. They convinced Giacomo Agostini to leave MV Agusta and ride for them. It was a bold move, and it paid off immediately. Agostini won the 350cc World Championship for Yamaha in 1974. Then, in 1975, he won the 500cc World Championship, his 8th and final Premier Class title. But this time, he did it on a Yamaha, not an MV Agusta. The Italian manufacturer's era of dominance was over. The Japanese Revolution had begun, and it would reshape the sport completely. When the Japanese manufacturers entered Grand Prix racing in earnest, they brought with them a level of engineering sophistication that the European manufacturers simply couldn't match. Honda, Yamaha, and Suzuki were companies that mass-produced motorcycles by the millions. They had research and development budgets that dwarfed those of the Italian boutique manufacturers. And they saw racing as the perfect laboratory to develop technologies that would eventually trickle down to their production bikes. Honda was the most ambitious. Founded by Soichiro Honda, a man obsessed with engineering excellence and speed, the company set its sights on the Isle of Man TT, the most prestigious race in the world. In 1959, Honda entered the Isle of Man TT races for the first time. They didn't win, but they made a statement. They would be back and they would be faster. By 1961, Honda was winning Grand Prix races. Tom Phillips secured Honda's first GP victory at the Spanish Grand Prix in the 125cc class. Kunimitsu Takahashi became the first Japanese rider to win a World GP event, triumphing in the 250cc class in Germany. That same year, Honda claimed both the 125cc and 250cc World Championships. It was a stunning debut, and it was just the beginning. Through the 1960s, Honda entered every solo class of the World GP series, from 50cc all the way up to 500cc. In 1966, Honda won World Championships in every single category they entered. It was a display of engineering dominance that stunned the racing world. Between 1959 and 1967, Honda amassed 138 Grand Prix victories before temporarily withdrawing from the sport at the end of 1967 to focus on their production motorcycle business. But Honda would return. And when they did, in the late 1970s and early 1980s, they would bring with them the NSR 500, a bike that would become legendary. The NSR 500 was a V4 two-stroke, a screaming, snarling beast of a machine that produced over 160 horsepower from a 500cc engine. It was light, agile, and brutally fast. In the right hands, it was unbeatable. Yamaha, meanwhile, had become the standard-bearer for two-stroke technology. Their YZR 500 was a rival to Honda's NSR 500, and the two manufacturers would battle for supremacy throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Suzuki also had its RGV 500, another two-stroke V4 that could compete at the highest level. These bikes were the cutting edge of motorcycle racing technology, and they required riders of extraordinary skill and bravery to ride them at the limit. Two-stroke engines are different from four-strokes. They're simpler in some ways, lighter, more responsive, but they're also peaky, delivering their power in a sudden, violent rush. And they had a narrow power band, which meant riders had to keep the revs high, constantly shifting, constantly on the edge. The bikes were notoriously difficult to ride. They'd high-side you in an instant if you made a mistake with the throttle. They'd slide and wiggle and dance beneath you, demanding every ounce of skill and concentration you possessed. But in the right hands, they were magic. And the Japanese manufacturers found riders who could unlock that magic. While the Japanese manufacturers were revolutionizing the machinery, a new breed of rider was emerging from the United States. These were young men who had grown up racing dirt bikes and flat track, learning to slide motorcycles sideways on loose surfaces, developing an instinctive feel for traction and balance. When they came to Grand Prix racing, they brought with them a different style, aggressive and fearless, willing to let the bike move beneath them in ways that European riders found unthinkable. The first of these American heroes was Kenny Roberts. King Kenny, they called him, and he was every bit as royal as his nickname suggested. Roberts came from the world of dirt track racing, where he'd been a champion, sliding his bike sideways around oval tracks at terrifying speeds. When he moved to Grand Prix racing in 1978, riding a Yamaha, he brought that dirt track style with him. In his very first season in the Premier 500cc class, Roberts won the World Championship. He won it again in 1979 and 1980, becoming the first American to dominate the sport at its highest level. His riding style was revolutionary. He hung off the inside of the bike in corners, dragging his knee along the asphalt, using his body weight to help the bike turn. Today, that's standard technique, but in 1978 it was radical. Other riders watched in amazement and then started copying him. Roberts had changed the way people rode motorcycles at speed, but Roberts was just the first wave. Behind him came a generation of American riders who would dominate the 1980s: Freddie Spencer, Eddie Lawson, Wayne Rainey, and Randy Mamola. These men turned Grand Prix racing into an American showcase, winning championship after championship, thrilling fans with their aggressive, spectacular riding. Freddie Spencer, nicknamed Fast Freddie, was a prodigy. He won his first 500cc World Championship in 1983 at the age of 21, riding a Honda. In 1985, he achieved something that has never been repeated. He won both the 250cc and 500cc World Championships in the same year. It was an astonishing feat that required him to race in two classes at every Grand Prix, often on the same day, pushing his body and mind to the absolute limit. After 1985, injuries and the demands of racing at that level took their toll, and Spencer's career wound down. But his legend was secure. He'd proven himself one of the fastest, most versatile riders the sport had ever seen. Eddie Lawson was the opposite of Spencer in many ways. Where Freddie was flashy and charismatic, Eddie was cool and methodical. But Lawson was just as fast, maybe faster. He won the 500cc World Championship in 1984, 1986, 1988, and 1989. He won on Yamahas and on Hondas, proving that it wasn't just the bike, it was the rider. Lawson was smooth, consistent, intelligent. He rarely made mistakes, and he had a knack for winning when it mattered most. He was a racer's racer, respected by everyone in the paddock. Wayne Rainey was another American dirt track refugee who brought his sliding, spectacular style to Grand Prix racing. He won the 500cc World Championship 3 years in a row, 1990, 1991, and 1992. He rode Yamahas, and he rode them hard, always on the ragged edge, constantly sawing at the handlebars, fighting the bike into submission. Rainey was fearless, and his battles with Kevin Schwantz, another American on a Suzuki, produced some of the most thrilling racing the sport has ever seen. Tragically, Rainey's career ended at the 1993 Italian Grand Prix at Misano. A crash in practice left him with a spinal cord injury, and he was paralyzed from the chest down. It was a devastating blow, not just for Rainey but for the entire racing community. He'd been at the peak of his powers, still young, still hungry for more championships. The accident was a stark reminder of the dangers these riders faced every time they threw a leg over a bike. Kevin Schwantz, Rainey's great rival, went on to win the 500cc World Championship in 1993, riding a Suzuki. Schwantz was one of the most spectacular riders ever, a man who seemed to crash every other weekend in practice but would put in astonishing performances in races. He had a never-give-up attitude, and fans loved him for it. By the mid-1990s, the American era was beginning to wane. The next generation of champions would come from other shores, but the Americans had left an indelible mark on the sport. They'd proven that Grand Prix racing wasn't just a European game. They'd brought new techniques, new levels of aggression, and new excitement to the sport. And they'd inspired riders from all over the world to believe that they too could compete at the highest level. While the Americans were making their mark, another English-speaking nation was producing riders of extraordinary talent: Australia. The land down under had a rich motorcycle racing culture, with dirt track and road racing deeply embedded in the national psyche. Australian riders were tough, resourceful, and fearless. And three of them in particular would leave their names etched in Grand Prix racing history: Wayne Gardner, Mick Doohan, and Casey Stoner. Wayne Gardner was the first Australian to win a 500cc World Championship. In 1987, riding a Honda, Gardner became a national hero. He'd grown up racing on the dirt tracks of Australia, learning to slide bikes sideways before he could barely reach the handlebars. When he moved to Grand Prix racing, he brought that rough-and-tumble style with him. Gardner was a fighter, never giving up, always pushing, and his championship win in 1987 opened the door for other Australians to follow. But it was Mick Doohan who would become Australia's greatest Grand Prix racer. Doohan was from Brisbane, and he came to racing relatively late, not starting on the GP scene until he was in his early 20s. But once he arrived, he was unstoppable. Well, almost unstoppable. In 1992, Doohan was leading the 500cc World Championship by a comfortable margin when disaster struck at the Dutch Grand Prix at Assen. A crash in practice shattered his right leg, and for a time, doctors considered amputation. The injuries were so severe that Doohan's career seemed over, but Mick Doohan wasn't ready to quit. With the help of Dr. Claudio Costa, a legendary motorsport physician, Doohan underwent extensive surgery and rehabilitation. He came back, but his leg was never the same. He had limited movement in his ankle, so his team developed a thumb-operated rear brake, mounted on the left handlebar, that allowed him to control the bike without using his right foot. It was an ingenious solution to a seemingly insurmountable problem. From 1994 to 1998, Doohan dominated Grand Prix racing like few had before or since. Riding a Honda NSR 500, he won 5 consecutive 500cc World Championships. In 1997, he won 12 out of 15 races, a level of dominance that was almost absurd. Doohan's style was clinical, precise. He would disappear off the start line, build a comfortable lead, and then cruise to victory, managing his tires and his bike with the skill of a master craftsman. He rarely crashed, rarely made mistakes. He was the benchmark, the standard against which all other riders were measured. In 1999, at a wet qualifying session in Spain, Doohan crashed again. This time, he broke his leg in multiple places, and the injuries finally convinced him to retire. He was 33 years old, and he'd given the sport everything he had. His legacy was secure: 5 world championships, 54 Grand Prix wins, and the respect of everyone who'd ever watched him ride. A few years later, another Australian arrived on the scene, and he was different from everyone who'd come before. Casey Stoner was born in 1985 on the Gold Coast, just a short distance from where Mick Doohan had grown up. Stoner was a prodigy. He'd been racing since he was 4 years old, and by the time he was a teenager, it was clear he had extraordinary talent. His family sacrificed everything to support his racing career, moving to England so Casey could race in the European Junior Championships, living in a motorhome, scraping by on limited funds. Stoner made his Grand Prix debut in 2001 at the age of 15. He worked his way up through the classes, showing flashes of brilliance but also struggling with equipment that wasn't always competitive. Then, in 2007, everything changed. Stoner signed with Ducati, an Italian manufacturer that had never won a premier-class world championship. The Ducati Desmos Disi was a powerful but difficult bike, temperamental and demanding. Most riders struggled to ride it fast. Casey Stoner didn't struggle. He made it sing. In his first season with Ducati, Stoner won 10 races and claimed the 2007 MotoGP World Championship at the age of 21. It was a stunning achievement, and it announced to the world that a new superstar had arrived. Stoner was different from other riders. He had an uncanny ability to feel what the bike was doing beneath him, to ride right on the edge of traction without going over. He made the impossible look easy, threading his Ducati through corners at speeds that defied belief. In 2011, Stoner moved to Repsol Honda, taking over the seat left vacant by the retiring Dani Pedrosa. On the Honda, Stoner was even faster. He won his second MotoGP World Championship in 2011, dominating the season with 10 victories. At his home track, Phillip Island in Australia, Stoner was unbeatable. He won there 6 years in a row, thrilling the huge crowds that came to watch him race. But in 2012, at the height of his powers, Stoner shocked the racing world by announcing his retirement. He was only 27 years old, still fast, still winning races. But he'd lost the joy in racing, worn down by the constant travel, the politics, and the pressure. He wanted to spend time with his family, to enjoy life away from the spotlight. It was a decision that many fans found hard to understand, but Stoner was at peace with it. He retired at the end of 2012, and he left behind a legacy as one of the most talented riders ever to swing a leg over a Grand Prix motorcycle. In the late 1990s, as Mick Doohan was reaching the twilight of his career, a young Italian rider was making his way up through the ranks. His name was Valentino Rossi, and he would become the most famous motorcycle racer the world has ever known. Rossi was born in 1979 in Urbino, Italy. His father, Graziano, had been a Grand Prix racer himself, so Valentino grew up immersed in the world of motorcycle racing. From an early age, it was clear that he had inherited his father's talent, and then some. Valentino was quick, fearless, and charismatic. He had a natural flair for racing and an infectious personality that made people love him. He won the 125cc World Championship in 1997, riding an Aprilia, taking 11 victories in 15 races. It was a dominant performance, and it marked him as a future star. In 1999, he moved up to the 250cc class and won that championship too, with 9 wins. And then, in 2000, he made the big leap to the premier class, joining Honda's factory team to ride the NSR 500. Rossi's rookie season in the 500cc class was impressive. He finished second in the championship behind Kenny Roberts Jr. But he'd already won 2 races, and it was clear that he was going to be a force to be reckoned with. Then, in 2001, everything clicked. The 500cc class had been replaced by MotoGP, with new rules allowing four-stroke engines up to 990cc. Rossi, now riding Honda's RC211V, won the first MotoGP championship, taking 11 victories out of 16 races. He was just 22 years old, and he was already a world champion in the premier class. But that was just the beginning. Rossi won again in 2002 and 2003, both times with Honda. Then, in 2004, he made a move that stunned the racing world. He left Honda, the most successful team in Grand Prix racing, to join Yamaha, a manufacturer that hadn't won a premier class championship in years. Many people thought he was making a mistake, that he'd thrown away his chance at more titles. Rossi proved them wrong. In his first season with Yamaha, 2004, Rossi won the MotoGP World Championship, taking 9 victories. It was a statement, proof that he was the reason for Honda's success, not the other way around. He won again in 2005, with 11 victories, matching his performance from 2001. By now, Rossi had become a global superstar, recognizable even to people who didn't follow motorcycle racing. He had a distinctive riding style, smooth and precise, and he had a flair for the dramatic, celebrating his victories with elaborate choreographed performances, dressing up in costumes, making fans laugh and cheer. They called him the Doctor, a nickname that had multiple origins. Some said it was because his racing number, 46, looked like the characters in the Italian word for doctor, daughter. Others said it was because of the clinical, surgical precision with which he dissected his rivals on the track. Whatever the reason, the name stuck, and Rossi embraced it. Rossi's dominance continued. He won the MotoGP championship again in 2008 and 2009, bringing his total to 7 premier class titles, tying him with legends like Giacomo Agostini. His battles with rivals like Max Biaggi, Seat Gibernau, and later Jorge Lorenzo and Casey Stoner produced some of the most memorable racing the sport has ever seen. One race in particular stands out: the 2008 United States Grand Prix at Laguna Seca. Rossi was locked in a championship battle with Casey Stoner, who was riding a Ducati and had already won several races that season. At Laguna Seca, the two engaged in an epic duel, going back and forth, trading positions lap after lap. On one lap, Rossi made a daring pass on Stoner at the corkscrew, a terrifying downhill series of corners. He went so deep on the brakes that he ran off the track, but he kept the bike upright, cut back onto the circuit, and held onto the lead. Stoner, rattled, made a mistake a few laps later and crashed. Rossi went on to win the race and ultimately the championship. It was vintage Rossi, aggressive, brave, and just a little bit crazy. But as the years went on, younger riders began to emerge. Jorge Lorenzo, Rossi's teammate at Yamaha, won the MotoGP championship in 2010, denying Rossi a 6th consecutive title. In 2011 and 2012, Rossi made a surprising move to Ducati, hoping to replicate his success with Yamaha. But the Ducati was a difficult bike, and even Rossi couldn't tame it. He managed just 3 podiums in 2 seasons, a stark contrast to his dominance at Yamaha and Honda. In 2013, Rossi returned to Yamaha, and while he was still competitive, winning races and finishing on the podium regularly, the championships eluded him. In 2015, at the age of 36, he came agonizingly close to winning his 10th World Championship. He led the standings for most of the season and went into the final race in Valencia with a chance to win the title. But a collision with Marc Marquez at the previous race in Malaysia had resulted in Rossi being penalized and forced to start from the back of the grid in Valencia. He finished 4th in the race, and his teammate Jorge Lorenzo won the championship by just 5 points. It was a heartbreaking end to what had been a brilliant season. Rossi would continue racing for several more years, winning his final race in 2017 at Assen, but he never won another championship. In 2021, at the age of 42, he announced his retirement, His final race was at Valencia, the same circuit where his dreams of a 10th title had been dashed 6 years earlier. Rossi's career statistics are staggering. He won 115 Grand Prix races across all classes, more than any rider except Giacomo Agostini. He stood on the podium 235 times. He competed in 432 Grand Prix races, participating in over 44% of all Grand Prix events held since the championship began in 1949. He won at 29 different circuits, more than any other rider in history. And he did it all with style, charisma, and a love for racing that was infectious. But Rossi's impact went beyond the numbers. He brought motorcycle racing to a new audience. He made the sport cool, exciting, accessible. He showed that you could be fast and fun, serious and silly. He inspired a generation of young riders, many of whom would go on to become champions themselves. And even today, years after his retirement, his VR46 racing team continues to compete in MotoGP, nurturing the next generation of talent. While Valentino Rossi was racing toward the end of his career, a young Spanish rider was beginning his. Marc Marquez, born in 1993 in Cervera, a small town in Catalonia, was a prodigy. He started racing dirt bikes as a child, and by the time he was a teenager, he was winning championships in the junior classes of Grand Prix racing. In 2008, at the age of 15, Marquez made his Grand Prix debut in the 125cc class. He was small, slight, and young, but he was also fearless and blindingly fast. He finished the season on the podium in his rookie year, and in 2010, he won the 125cc World Championship, taking 10 victories in 17 races. It was a dominant performance, and it marked him as a future star. In 2011, Marquez moved up to the Moto2 class, the intermediate category between the smallest bikes and MotoGP. His first season was difficult. He had a tough start and then suffered a serious eye injury in a crash that left him with vision problems. For a time, it seemed like his career might be in jeopardy. But after surgery and rehabilitation, Marquez came back stronger than ever. In 2012, he won the Moto2 World Championship in spectacular fashion, taking 9 victories and putting on some of the most breathtaking displays of riding the sport had ever seen. Then, in 2013, at the age of 20, Marquez made the leap to MotoGP, joining the Repsol Honda factory team. He replaced Casey Stoner, one of the greatest riders in the history of the sport, and many people wondered if Marquez was ready for the challenge. He answered those questions emphatically. In his rookie MotoGP season, Marquez won 6 races and claimed the World Championship, becoming the youngest rider ever to win the Premier Class title. It was a stunning achievement, and it announced to the world that a new era had begun. Marquez was fast, aggressive, and spectacular. He rode right on the edge, sometimes beyond it, and he had an uncanny ability to save crashes that would have taken out any other rider. He would slide the front tire, almost losing it, then catch it with lightning reflexes and carry on as if nothing had happened. It was breathtaking to watch, and fans around the world fell in love with his daring style. In 2014, Marquez was even more dominant. He won the first 10 races of the season, a streak that has never been matched in MotoGP. He went on to win 13 races out of 18 and claimed his second consecutive world championship. It seemed like he was unbeatable, that he would dominate the sport for years to come. And for a while, he did. Marquez won the MotoGP World Championship again in 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. 6 championships in 7 years. Only Jorge Lorenzo's victory in 2015 interrupted his run. Marquez's riding style was unlike anything anyone had seen before. He leaned the bike over further than seemed physically possible, his elbow scraping the asphalt as he dragged the bike through corners. He pushed the limits of what the Honda RCV could do, and he won races by being braver, more committed, more willing to risk everything than anyone else. But in 2020, everything changed. At the opening race of the season in Jerez, Spain, Marquez crashed heavily. He broke his right arm, his humerus snapped in two. It was a serious injury, but the doctors operated, inserted a plate, and said he'd be okay. Marquez, ever determined, tried to race at the same circuit just a few days later, but the strain was too much. The plate broke. He needed more surgery. What followed was a nightmare. Marquez underwent multiple surgeries on his arm, each one trying to fix complications from the previous one. He developed an infection. The bone wouldn't heal properly. For a year, then 2 years, he was sidelined, watching from the sidelines as other riders fought for championships. It was agonizing, not just physically but mentally. For a rider like Marquez, who'd known nothing but success, the inability to race was torture. He came back in 2021, but he wasn't the same. The arm was weak, the confidence was shaken. He won a race at the Sachsenring in Germany, a track where he'd never lost, but it was clear he was struggling. In 2022, he had more problems with the arm, more surgeries. At times, it seemed like his career might be over, that the injuries were too severe, the damage too great. But Marquez is a fighter. In 2023, he made a bold decision. He left the Repsol Honda factory team, the team he'd been with his entire MotoGP career, and joined the satellite Gresini Ducati team. It was a huge risk. Ducati's bikes were different from the Honda he'd ridden for over a decade. But Marquez believed that a change was necessary, that he needed a fresh start, a new challenge. The gamble paid off. In 2024, riding a Ducati for the first time, Marquez began to find his form again. He was fast, competitive, and by mid-season, he was winning races again. The old Marquez, the fearless, spectacular rider, was back. And then, in 2025, he joined the Ducati factory team as their lead rider, partnering with Francesco Bagnaia. The 2025 season was a triumph. Marquez won race after race, dominating the championship from start to finish. He clinched the title in Japan with 5 races still to go, becoming the oldest rider to win a MotoGP championship in the modern era and achieving his 7th Premier Class title. It was one of the greatest comebacks in the history of sport. After over 2,000 days since his last championship, after multiple surgeries, after doubt and pain and struggle, Marquez had returned to the top of the world. His story is one of resilience, determination, and sheer bloody-mindedness. He refused to accept that his career was over. He worked, he fought, he never gave up. And in the end, he proved that talent and heart can overcome even the most devastating setbacks. Throughout the decades of Grand Prix racing, certain circuits have achieved legendary status. These are the tracks that every rider dreams of winning at, the places where history is made and legends are born. Let's take a journey around some of these sacred grounds of speed. First, there's Assen in the Netherlands, known as the Cathedral of Speed. Assen has hosted Grand Prix races every single year since 1949, making it the only circuit to have been on the calendar continuously since the championship began. The track is 4-5 kilometers long, with fast, flowing corners and unpredictable weather that can turn a race on its head in an instant. The circuit is built in a natural bowl, allowing over 100,000 spectators to watch from the grass banks that surround the track. On race day, the place is a sea of orange, filled with Dutch fans waving flags and singing songs, creating an atmosphere unlike anywhere else in motorsport. Assen rewards bravery and precision. The corners flow together, and to be fast here, you need to be smooth, carrying speed through the turns rather than relying on heavy braking and acceleration. The weather in the Netherlands is notoriously fickle, and it's not uncommon for a race to start in the dry and end in pouring rain, or vice versa. Riders who can adapt quickly, who can read the conditions and adjust their riding, are the ones who succeed at Assen. Some of the most memorable races in Grand Prix history have been held at Assen. In 2005, Valentino Rossi and Giacomo engaged in an epic duel, trading positions lap after lap, until Rossi made a breathtaking pass on the final lap to snatch victory. In 2018, the race was run in mixed conditions, with some parts of the track wet and others dry, and the result was chaos, drama, and an unforgettable spectacle. Then there's Mugello in Italy, nestled in the green hills of Tuscany. Owned by Ferrari since 1988, Mugello is one of the most beautiful racetracks in the world. The circuit is 5.2 kilometers long, with 15 corners and a long straight that stretches over 1 kilometers, where bikes can reach speeds exceeding 350 kilometers per hour. The track features significant elevation changes, with the main straight climbing uphill before plunging down into the first corner, a fast right-hander called San Donato. Mugello is a rider's favorite. The corners are fast and flowing, and the track rewards commitment and bravery. The Italian fans, known as the Tifosi, fill the grandstands with passion and noise, waving flags and setting off smoke flares, especially when an Italian rider is on the podium. The atmosphere at Mugello is electric, a celebration of speed and Italian motorcycling heritage. The track has been the site of many historic races. In 2004, Valentino Rossi won at Mugello in front of his adoring fans, and the celebrations were legendary. In 2016, Jorge Lorenzo put in one of the most dominant performances ever seen at Mugello, winning by over 5 seconds in a masterclass of smooth, precise riding. On the other side of the world, there's Phillip Island in Australia. Located on an island off the southern coast, Phillip Island is one of the fastest and most spectacular circuits in MotoGP. The track is 4 kilometers long, with fast, sweeping corners and a layout that allows bikes to carry high speeds for much of the lap. The circuit runs right alongside the ocean, and on a clear day, the views are stunning, with waves crashing against the cliffs just meters from the track. Phillip Island rewards bravery. The corners are taken at high speed, with minimal braking, and the wind off the ocean can buffet the bikes, making it a physical challenge for the riders. The weather can also be unpredictable, with conditions changing rapidly. But when the weather is good, Phillip Island produces some of the best racing of the year. The fast, flowing layout allows riders to battle closely, often with multiple riders swapping positions lap after lap. Casey Stoner was the king of Phillip Island. He won at his home track 6 years in a row, from 2007 to 2012, often putting on dominant displays that left his rivals far behind. In 2015, the Australian Grand Prix at Phillip Island produced one of the most thrilling races in MotoGP history, with multiple riders fighting for the lead, positions changing almost every corner, and a dramatic last-lap battle that had fans on the edge of their seats. In Spain, there's Jerez, located in Andalusia. The Circuito de Jerez has been hosting Grand Prix races since 1987, and it's known for its technical layout, with tight, slow corners and intense braking zones. The track is 4 kilometers long, with 13 corners, and it demands precision and rhythm. The weather in southern Spain is usually hot and dry, which puts a premium on tire management and physical fitness. Jerez is often the first or second European race of the season, and it's a popular test track, so riders know it well. The Spanish fans are passionate, filling the grandstands with noise and color, and when a Spanish rider wins, the celebrations are wild. Jerez has been the site of many controversial moments, including the infamous clash between Valentino Rossi and Giacomo in 2005, when Rossi made an aggressive pass on the final lap that forced Giacomo wide and allowed Rossi to take the victory. The incident sparked debate and animosity that lasted for years. And then there's the Sachsenring in Germany, a unique circuit with a strange, almost triangular layout. The Sachsenring is the shortest track on the MotoGP calendar at just 3.7 kilometers, and it features more left-hand corners than right, which makes it physically demanding on the riders, who have to lean left over and over, straining their neck and shoulder muscles. The track is located in eastern Germany, and it has a loyal following of fans who come to see their heroes race. Marc Marquez owns the Sachsenring. He's won there an astonishing number of times, including an unbroken streak from 2010 to 2021 across the 125cc, Moto2, and MotoGP classes. His dominance at the circuit is so complete that other riders joked they were racing for second place when they arrived at the Sachsenring. In 2021, after a long absence due to injury, Marquez returned to the Sachsenring and won again, proving that his mastery of the circuit was as strong as ever. Each of these circuits has its own character, its own challenges, its own history. And every year, riders arrive at these tracks knowing that they're walking in the footsteps of legends, that the ghosts of past champions are watching, that to win here is to add your name to a list that includes the greatest riders who ever lived. Grand Prix racing has given us countless unforgettable moments, races where the outcome hung in the balance until the very last corner, duels that had fans screaming at their televisions, crashes that left hearts in mouths, and victories that brought tears of joy. Let's relive a few of these legendary battles. One of the most famous races in MotoGP history took place at Laguna Seca in California in 2008. Valentino Rossi and Casey Stoner were locked in a championship battle, and at Laguna Seca, they put on a show that will never be forgotten. The two traded positions lap after lap, neither willing to give an inch. Stoner was fast, but Rossi was relentless, hounding him, pressuring him, waiting for an opportunity. That opportunity came at the corkscrew, a terrifying downhill sequence of corners where the track plunges steeply and changes direction twice in quick succession. Rossi went for a desperate lunge on the brakes, diving to the inside of Stoner. He went so deep that he couldn't make the corner, and he ran wide off the track, through the gravel. But somehow he kept the bike upright, wrestled it back onto the circuit, and maintained the lead. Stoner, shaken and rattled by Rossi's aggression, made a mistake a few laps later and crashed out. Rossi went on to win the race, and the move at the corkscrew became one of the most iconic moments in MotoGP history. Then there was the 2015 season finale at Valencia, a race that had fans and pundits talking for months afterward. Valentino Rossi and Jorge Lorenzo were fighting for the championship, but heading into the final race, the two riders were embroiled in controversy. At the previous race in Malaysia, Rossi had collided with Marc Marquez, sending Marquez to the ground. Rossi was penalized and forced to start the Valencia race from the back of the grid. The tension was unbearable. Rossi needed to win and hope that Lorenzo finished outside the top three. He rode brilliantly from the back, carving his way through the field, but it wasn't enough. Lorenzo rode a perfect race, calm and collected, and took the victory. He won the championship by just 5 points, denying Rossi his 10th world title. It was a bitter pill for Rossi and his fans to swallow, and the controversy surrounding the Malaysia incident left a cloud over the championship. In 2017, at Phillip Island, there was an unforgettable last-lap battle between Marc Marquez and Valentino Rossi. The two had been racing hard all day, and going into the final lap, they were separated by just a few tenths of a second. They pushed each other to the absolute limit, swapping positions multiple times on that final lap. Marquez made a mistake at one corner, running wide, and Rossi swept into the lead. But Marquez wasn't done. He fought back, diving up the inside at the next corner, nearly colliding with Rossi in a desperate attempt to retake the position. In the end, Marquez crossed the line first, winning by just a few hundredths of a second. It was pure racing, no team orders, no politics, just two of the greatest riders in the world giving everything they had. And then there are the moments of sheer heartbreak, like when Marco Simoncelli, a young Italian rider full of promise and potential, was killed in a crash at Sepang in Malaysia in 2011. Simoncelli, known for his wild riding style and his mane of curly hair that barely fit inside his helmet, had been expected to become a future champion. His death was a tragedy that shook the entire MotoGP paddock and reminded everyone of the dangers these riders face every time they race. Or the moment when Nicky Hayden, the 2006 MotoGP world champion, was killed in a bicycle accident in Italy in 2017. Hayden, known as the Kentucky Kid, was beloved in the paddock for his down-to-earth personality and his never-give-up attitude. His death was a devastating loss for the sport and for everyone who knew him. But there have also been moments of pure triumph, like when Jorge Lorenz won the 2015 championship in Valencia, silencing his critics and proving that he was one of the greats. Or when Francesco Bagnaia won his first MotoGP World Championship in 2022, bringing the title back to Ducati after years of near misses. Or when Fabio Quartararo became the first French rider to win the MotoGP Championship in 2021, riding a Yamaha and overcoming incredible odds to take the crown. These moments, these races, these battles are what make MotoGP special. They're why fans around the world wake up in the middle of the night to watch races, why they travel thousands of miles to stand trackside, why they argue passionately about their favorite riders. Because at its heart, MotoGP is about competition in its purest form. Human beings pushing themselves and their machines to the absolute limit, risking everything for a few seconds of glory. As we move into the present day, MotoGP continues to evolve. The sport is faster, more competitive, and more global than ever before. The current grid features 22 riders from multiple continents, racing for 5 factory teams: Ducati, Honda, Yamaha, KTM, and Aprilia. Each manufacturer brings its own philosophy, its own approach to motorcycle design, and the competition is fierce. Ducati has emerged as the dominant force in recent years. After decades of near misses and heartbreak, the Italian manufacturer finally cracked the code. Their Desmos GP bike is fast, powerful, and versatile, capable of winning at every type of circuit. Casey Stoner won Ducati's first MotoGP championship in 2007, but then the manufacturer struggled for years, unable to repeat that success. Finally, in 2022, Francesco Bagnaia brought the championship back to Ducati, and he defended the title in 2023. Then, in 2024, Jorge Martin won the championship on a satellite Ducati, and in 2025, Marc Marquez won his 7th title, also on a Ducati. Ducati's success is built on innovation and investment. They've developed cutting-edge aerodynamics with wings and devices that help the bike change direction and improve stability. They've perfected their engine, finding a balance between power and rideability. And they've signed the best riders, creating a deep roster of talent that keeps them at the front of the field. But the other manufacturers aren't standing still. Honda, once the dominant force in MotoGP, has struggled in recent years, but they're working hard to regain their competitive edge. Yamaha, the team that Valentino Rossi made famous, is rebuilding, trying to recapture the magic that brought them so many championships. KTM, a relative newcomer to MotoGP, has made significant progress, winning races and developing young talent. And Aprilia, the smallest of the factory teams, has emerged as a surprise contender, with their RSGP bike proving to be fast and competitive. The current generation of riders is incredibly talented. Francesco Bagnaia, known as Pecco, is a smooth, precise rider who rarely makes mistakes. Jorge Martin, intense and aggressive, proved in 2024 that you don't need a factory team to win a championship. Fabio Quartararo, the French rider who won the title in 2021, is known for his incredible corner speed and his ability to extract the maximum from the Yamaha. Brad Binder and Jack Miller bring their own unique styles, and younger riders like Pedro Acosta are making their mark, showing that the future of MotoGP is bright. The sport has also become more sophisticated technologically. Electronics play a huge role with traction control, anti-wheelie systems, and engine braking management helping riders control over 300 horsepower. Aerodynamics have become critical, with every team developing wings and fairings designed to maximize downforce and stability. Tire strategy is more important than ever, with Michelin providing a range of compounds that must be managed carefully throughout a race. But despite all the technology, at the end of the day, it still comes down to the rider. The bravest, the smartest, the most skilled riders are the ones who win. And that's what makes MotoGP timeless. It's a sport where human courage and talent are on display, where milliseconds matter, where the difference between glory and disaster is razor thin. Looking ahead, the sport continues to evolve. Sustainability is becoming a focus, with plans to introduce lower capacity engines and non-fossil fuels in the coming years. The goal is to reduce the environmental impact of racing while maintaining the spectacle and competition that fans love. There's also MotoE, an electric racing series that runs alongside MotoGP at selected events, showcasing the potential of electric motorcycles and green technology. But no matter how much the sport changes, the core will remain the same. Brave riders, fast bikes, and the pursuit of speed. That's what MotoGP has always been about, and that's what it will continue to be. So here we are, at the end of our journey through the history of MotoGP. We've traveled from 1949 to today, from the Isle of Man to Phillip Island, from Giacomo Agostini to Marc Marquez. We've met the legends, ridden the legendary tracks, and relived the unforgettable moments. And through it all, one thing is clear: MotoGP is more than just a sport. It's a passion, a calling, a way of life. For the riders, it's the ultimate challenge. To race at over 200 miles per hour, leaning the bike over until your knee touches the ground, fighting for position with 20 other riders who are just as fast and just as determined as you are, that requires courage beyond what most of us can comprehend. It requires skill, dedication, physical fitness, and mental toughness. It requires a willingness to risk everything, to face the possibility of injury or worse, all for the chance to stand on the top step of the podium and hear your national anthem play. For the fans, MotoGP is a source of joy, excitement, and sometimes heartbreak. It's Sunday afternoons spent watching races, cheering for your favorite rider, celebrating their victories and commiserating in their defeats. It's traveling to circuits, standing trackside, feeling the ground shake as the bikes thunder past, smelling the fuel and rubber, seeing the riders lean so far over that it seems impossible they don't fall. It's a community, a shared experience that connects people from all over the world. And for those of us who love motorcycles, who have felt the thrill of twisting the throttle and feeling a bike surge forward, who have leaned into a corner and felt that perfect balance between speed and control, MotoGP is a reminder of what's possible. It shows us what machines can do in the right hands, what human beings are capable of when they push themselves to the limit. The history of MotoGP is filled with heroes and legends, but it's also filled with ordinary people who did extraordinary things. Mechanics who worked through the night to rebuild engines, team managers who made split-second strategic decisions that won or lost championships, engineers who designed bikes that pushed the boundaries of technology, fans who traveled across continents to support their heroes. All of them are part of the story, part of the tapestry that makes MotoGP what it is. As you drift off to sleep tonight, maybe you'll dream of racing, of leaning a bike into a corner at impossible speeds, of standing on a podium with champagne spraying and crowds cheering. Maybe you'll dream of Assen or Mugello, or Phillip Island, of the sound of engines and the smell of racing fuel. Or maybe you'll just sleep peacefully, content in the knowledge that out there somewhere, riders are preparing for the next race, mechanics are tuning bikes, and the story of MotoGP continues. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the world of Grand Prix motorcycle racing. If you enjoyed this, stick around. There are more stories to tell, more legends to celebrate, more miles to travel down this endless highway of speed and courage. Until next time, sleep well, dream fast, and remember, it's not about the destination, it's about the ride. And with that, the throttle closes, the engine quiets, and the night carries us away. Good night.